My entire family is forcing me to marry my sister's fiancé, the crippled illegitimate son of the Felix Group. Later, Felix started his own company and became the wealthiest man around. My sister immediately regretted it. I'm your fiancé. You're supposed to marry me. In the previous life, Felix did marry her, and he died a tragic death. But now both he and I are reborn. Sitting at the vanity, I let the makeup artist work on my face. Today, I was called up early to get dressed and made up for no other reason than it being my wedding day with Felix. The door creaked open and Tiffany strutted in, her high heels clicking on the floor. She looked down her nose and mocked me. "Coco, you're finally marrying Felix. Are you happy?" I just glanced up coldly at her and said, "Oh, I'm very happy. As long as you won't regret it later." Hearing this, Tiffany laughed heartily, clutching her stomach. "Regret, Coco? Are you dreaming? Why would I regret getting rid of that burden? Without it, my life can only get better." A month ago, Felix was still Tiffany's fiancé. The Portman family and the Howard family had arranged marriages since childhood, with the eldest son and daughter destined to wed. But a year ago, the Howard family acknowledged an illegitimate son who had been suffering outside for many years, skinny and with a lame leg. Yet, he was still the eldest son. For the sake of our family honor, Tiffany had to marry him. Upon hearing this, Tiffany cried and threw tantrums for days. My parents, who adored her, were very troubled. They couldn't bear to see her step into such a miserable marriage. Thus, they turned their attention to me, bringing me back from the countryside to marry Felix in her stead. In the previous life, Felix married Tiffany, but just as his career was booming, he was backstabbed by his delicate wife. She leaked confidential information to his half-brother, leading to his downfall and tragic death. But in this life, for some reason, Tiffany persuaded the Howard family to let me marry Felix instead. I smirked at Tiffany, raising my eyebrows. "Don't be happy too soon, sis. The end isn't set in stone yet." After saying that, I turned and left the dressing room. The ending wasn't set because I had been reborn. As the Howard family's servants pushed Felix in his wheelchair into the hall, I glanced at the man through the crowd. His face was paler and thinner than a year ago, but still frail-looking. Only I knew this man would later become the most powerful figure in city. At the wedding in the previous life, Tiffany cried incessantly, but this time I calmly completed my vows. Felix and I, amidst the crowd's curious and mocking gazes, finished the somewhat mismatched wedding. I became Mrs. Felix. After marriage, Felix obviously couldn't continue living in the Howard family mansion. We moved into our new house together. Back home, Felix slowly stood up from his wheelchair, limping towards me. I stepped forward to help him, but was pushed away. Cold indifference filled his eyes. "I don't need your pity." I froze for a moment, then understood. Felix had suffered hardship from a young age, and even after returning to the Howard family, he endured endless mockery from his brother Henry and Mrs. Howard. Under such circumstances, he naturally grew sensitive and fragile. Ignoring his resistance, I helped him to the sofa. "Since we are married, we are one family now. There's no need to reject my help." Surprised by my words, a certain warmth flickered in his eyes, making them softer. Satisfied, I smiled. Anyone who suffered so much would be deeply touched by their first taste of kindness. Since I decided to be a good Mrs. Felix and use his power to take down the family that used me, the Portman family, I had to win Felix over. The next day, Felix and I visited the Howard family mansion to see his parents. The Howards were even more prestigious than the Portmans. If it weren't for the arranged marriage from years ago, the Portman family wouldn't have been able to reach their level. Mr. Howard greeted us warmly, inviting us to sit and chat. He felt he owed Felix and always wanted to make up for it. In the previous life, during Felix's struggle with Henry, Mr. Howard supported Felix. Unfortunately, Henry's maternal family was powerful, and they held key information, allowing him to narrowly win and utterly destroy Felix. Mrs. Howard, however, was clearly displeased with our visit. Covering her nose, she coughed dramatically. If the sick person stayed home and recuperated, it wouldn't matter. But spreading your germs and bad luck to others is unacceptable. My Henry can't handle that kind of crap. Henry glanced provocatively at Felix. Felix turned pale but didn't say anything. He was used to this kind of mockery and insult. Mr. Howard furrowed his brow and glanced at Mrs. Howard but said nothing. Bringing an illegitimate child home and acknowledging him was already a stretch, so he could only privately encourage Felix to endure their mother and son's sarcasm. I openly gave Felix a piece of meat and smiled, chiming in, "Yes, honey, you should eat more to recover. We still need to have babies in the future." My boldness left everyone at the table stunned. No one expected me to so quickly embrace my role as Mrs. Howard. Felix was momentarily taken aback, but then understood I was helping him out. He smiled back at me and gave me some food in return. Mrs. Howard couldn't stand our love display any longer. Putting down her chopsticks, she declared that she felt unwell and needed Henry to help her back to her room. The family dinner ended on a sour note. Sitting back in the car, Felix gently held my hand and hesitantly asked, "Coco, don't you feel wronged marrying someone like me?" I squeezed his hand tightly and affirmed, "How could I? It's just a physical flaw. While some people with huge inner deficiencies can still enjoy wealth and luxury, why shouldn't you deserve the same?" Thinking of my tragic past life, my eyes darkened as I vowed to help Felix change his fate this time, to support his career, and to make those who looked down on us regret it, ensuring those who harmed us paid the price. Peace didn't last long before Tiffany came looking for me. When the receptionist called to tell me Tiffany was here, I instinctively frowned. It was like a weasel paying a New Year visit to a hen. She obviously had no good intentions. But I couldn't refuse, so I let the receptionist show her in, prepared to deal with whatever came my way. Tiffany still carried herself with arrogance. She casually tossed her designer bag onto my desk, scattering my design drafts all over the floor. I frowned and asked, "Miss Tiffany, what brings you here today?" I had been reborn a year ago, just when Felix returned to the Howard family, and the Portman family brought me back from the countryside to cover for Tiffany. In my previous life, I obediently stayed home, neither competing for inheritance nor the company, just wanting to live peacefully. But Tiffany still wouldn't let me be. She hated that I could fall in love freely while she was stuck in an arranged marriage to a man she resented. She also resented that I could inherit all of Grandma's savings and live comfortably. So she schemed to ruin my reputation, leaving me despised and humiliated until I tragically took my own life, just to see me as miserable as she was. Given my rebirth, I wouldn't repeat the same mistakes and wait at home for others to harm me. So I opened a studio to set more plans in motion for myself. Coco, you know Felix isn't in great health, and as an illegitimate son, you should know who will hold power in the Howard family eventually, right? Tiffany spoke surprisingly cordially. I furrowed my brow and asked directly, "What do you mean, Tiffany? My work is plenty, and my time is valuable. If you can't get to the point, please leave." Though I had my suspicions, she dropped the pretense, revealing, "Henry wants to work with you. You know, despite being the second son, he's got strong support from his mother's side. It's almost certain he'll come out ahead in the future battle for control of the F Group." I raised an eyebrow, leaned back, and asked, "Why would Henry want to work with me?" Then, despite lacking maternal support, it's clear Mr. Howard dotes on Felix. Tiffany, irritated, retorted, no matter how much Mr. Howard dotes on him, he wouldn't hand everything to a bastard. And look at him, all skin and bones. He won't live long anyway. I'm pitying you, thinking of you as my sister, not wanting you to end up a lonely widow. Giving you this opportunity. Like anyone would believe Tiffany actually cared about me, I finally asked, "So what do you want?" Relieved, Tiffany regained her smug demeanor. "You don't have to do much, just keep an eye on Felix and report any company secrets. When necessary, help Henry tamper with or steal documents." I couldn't help but laugh. Do you realize what you're suggesting is illegal, and you're brazenly saying it here? Tiffany froze, realizing she was tricked. Before she could speak, I interrupted. Forget it. Felix and I have a loving marriage. There's no chance for you to exploit it. I'll also inform Felix about your plans. Thanks for the warning. Enraged, Tiffany shouted, her face turning red. Coco, don't be disrespectful. You'll regret this. We'll see who regrets it. I looked her straight in the eyes, unafraid. I called security to escort Miss Tiffany out through the intercom. Fuming, Tiffany stomped out of my office. Watching her walk away, my muscles relaxed. Memories of the past life's torments she inflicted on me were still fresh. Even now, seeing her made my body tense up. In my past life, I willingly joined forces with Henry. But in this life, even though I didn't marry Felix, Tiffany still came to try and persuade me to be their informant. It's understandable. Growing up, everyone told Tiffany that her future husband would be Henry, the young master of the Howard family. She's had a crush on him since she was young, and despite his constant affairs, she's deeply in love with him. In my previous life, she risked jail time to help Henry seize the family assets. But I'm not like Tiffany. I'm not so easily manipulated. The most important thing is Henry has often helped Tiffany commit her wrongdoings. They are all on the same boat and are my enemies, the people I seek revenge on. When I got home, I hesitated for a moment, but decided to tell Felix that Tiffany came to the office today. Felix seemed surprised that I would tell him this. She said Henry wants to collaborate with me, but I refused him. I told Felix everything honestly but warned him to still be careful of the people around him, especially those who have access to confidential files in the company. In my past life, Tiffany could steal confidential documents from the company so easily because there had to be accomplices inside the company. After hearing what I said, Felix's face turned serious. He seemed surprised that I refused Henry and asked, "Why did you refuse him?" His offer must have been very tempting. I was stunned that he would ask this question. I thought for a moment, anger welling up inside me. I said to Felix, "Because I love you. I'm your wife. Since we are in this together, I won't abandon you. Why don't you trust me? Or do you not believe someone can love you unconditionally?" I looked at Felix's pale, sickly face and felt a sudden sadness. This insecure man finally opened his heart to his wife in our past life, only to be betrayed by the one he loved the most. Felix stared at me for a very long time, his lips trembling. Then, suddenly, he pulled me into a tight hug as if trying to merge us into one. "Coco, please don't betray me. You're all I have left." During the new year, Felix and I had to go back to the Howard family mansion for dinner. I squeezed Felix's hand to comfort him. He looked up and gave me a small smile. Over the past few months, our relationship had slowly warmed up, and he finally began to open up to me. Mrs. Howard and Henry still treated us with disdain, just like they did 6 months ago. Henry's eyes showed even more hostility, likely because he hadn't expected me to refuse his offer but hadn't given up. When I came out of the restroom, a shadow grabbed me forcefully and dragged me back inside. I struggled in the darkness. Dim light from outside revealed it was Henry. In the darkness, with the man's heavy breathing and my restrained body, I couldn't help but recall the cold night in my past life when I was framed by Tiffany and raped by a criminal. Luckily, it was winter, and I was dressed warmly. Henry pinned me against the sink, holding me tight, breathing into my ear. "Coco, I'll give you another chance. Join me. It's much better than staying with that cripple." His voice was close, and he crudely touched my ear, making me shiver. "No, I won't." I mustered all my strength to refuse, tears welling up uncontrollably. "Oh, why don't you tell me you've really fallen for that cripple? Can he satisfy you? If you come with me, I won't treat you badly." And now you have no other choice. He started trying to remove my clothes. I couldn't help but scream, but Henry covered my mouth tightly. My strength was fading, and just when I was about to lose hope, the bathroom door was forcefully opened. I saw Felix stumble in. Seeing someone enter, Henry relaxed his grip. I pushed him away and ran into Felix's arms, finally breaking into tears from the fear and grievance. Felix hugged me tightly, gently patting my back to comfort me. Henry raised his eyebrows at the scene, loosened his tie, and then, behind Felix, came the frantic footsteps of Mr. and Mrs. Howard. But Henry didn't panic. He casually waited for them to enter and see the scene. Mr. Howard was so furious that his cane almost wobbled out of his hand. He pointed at Henry and was about to speak, but Henry was faster. "Dad, she seduced me. She waited for me outside the restroom, and when she saw me, she jumped on me and pulled me inside. She said she preferred me, that my brother couldn't satisfy her, and that he wasn't as good as me." He deliberately dragged out his words, provocatively looking at Felix. I looked up at Felix, whose already pale face turned even whiter. I desperately wanted to explain it wasn't me. "I didn't do it. I know." "I believe you." Felix pressed my head back into his chest, protecting me tightly. The truth was obvious to everyone, but no one could say it out loud. That's the reality of a powerful family. Mr. Howard slammed his cane on the wooden floor. The sound echoed through the silent Howard mansion. You. Mr. Howard was so angry he could barely speak. Although his health had been declining over the years, he hadn't expected his own son to commit such utterly disgraceful and unethical actions right under his nose. Mrs. Howard cut him off, saying, "Henry has always been well-behaved since he was a child. With so many wealthy young women chasing after him, how could he possibly be interested in a married woman? It must be this vixen seducing Henry." She pointed at me. "Yes, Mom. You know me well." Henry followed her lead, looking pitiful as he reached for her hand. "My boy, you've been wronged." Mrs. Howard patted Henry's hand, acting as if she was about to cry. Seeing this, Felix's eyes darkened even more. "Besides, I can't be sure that if we continue to stay under the same roof, my sister-in-law won't do something outrageous to me," he said, glaring at Felix with a challenging look in his eyes. "A bastard and a woman who seduces her brother-in-law, how can you still show your faces in the Howard family? You've inherited every bit of that disgraceful mother of yours." Mrs. Howard picked up the taunt, shouting loudly enough. Mr. Howard banged his cane, his body shaking as if he was about to faint from anger. Felix let go of me and turned to support Mr. Howard. When he turned back, his gaze was icy as he regarded Henry and his mother. "I will leave the Howard family and start my own business. I won't fight you for the F group," Felix said coldly, leaving everyone stunned. Henry and his mother never expected Felix to leave the Howard family so willingly. I was also frozen in place. In my past life, Felix left the Howard family and started his own business, but it was 3 years later. What had happened to change everyone's actions so swiftly? Could my rebirth have triggered a butterfly effect? But I hadn't done anything at all. After leaving the mansion, my relationship with Felix deepened. In critical moments, I could see his concern for me. He noticed both Henry and I were missing from the banquet and, feeling something was wrong, rushed to rescue me without even bothering to grab his cane or wheelchair. Once Felix left the Howard family and started his own business, I could easily see he felt more relaxed, possibly because he no longer had to endure the constant jabs and pressure from Henry and his mother. With Mr. Howard's help, Felix's company was successfully established and began to operate smoothly. In less than 2 years, Felix had made a name for himself in City A. People said he had a shadow of Mr. Howard in his heyday. At the beginning of the year, there was an auction, and Felix took me to attend it. I was browsing through the auction catalog when I felt a sense of familiarity. Today's first item for auction was a piece of land at the suburban sewage treatment plant, presented as the opening item. The suburban sewage treatment plant. I suddenly looked up, remembering in my previous life that not long after the auction, the government designated this area as the site for a new metro station. It was not only a crucial part of the metro line, but also a connecting point between City A and City B. The government ended up buying the land for several times the auction price. I was about to turn to tell Felix to bid for the land when he had already raised his paddle. 1 million. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone knew the suburban sewage treatment plant had been abandoned for years, and the land was polluted. It was useless for agriculture, forestry, animal husbandry, or fishing. And being in the suburbs meant no one would go there. Naturally, no one was going to outbid him for this piece of wasteland. Henry, sitting in the front row, also turned to watch the spectacle. Our eyes met, his filled with mockery. Felix didn't make another bid for the rest of the auction. When the event was over and people were leaving, Henry blocked our way. He looked down at us and sneered, "You waste the old man's money on worthless land." The old man must be truly blind to think you could be his successor. His tone was laced with jealousy. Felix ignored him, not even sparing him a glance, and took my hand as we left through another door, leaving Henry seething and pounding the seat behind us. When the abandoned sewage treatment plant was eventually bought by the government for 5 million, Henry was furious. But how did Felix know this land would become so valuable? A strange feeling suddenly stirred in me. From agreeing to change the marriage arrangement to bidding on the sewage treatment plant, the real changes in the story's direction didn't come from me. All of the butterfly effects originated from Felix. A terrifying suspicion crossed my mind. Could Felix have also been reborn? If I could be reborn, so could he. After all, we both met tragic ends in our past life. After this thought took root, I kept testing Felix, but Felix was meticulous in everything he did, never leaving any openings for me to test him. After the sewage treatment plant incident, which not only netted us a profit of 4 million, but also gained Felix admiration from other companies and some veterans, more shareholders within the F Group began to want him to take over the company. In such a situation, Tiffany and Henry grew increasingly restless. One day, as I brought Felix lunch, I happened to catch Tiffany coming to see him at the office. Felix and I exchanged glances. I was suddenly curious about what Tiffany wanted with him, so I hid behind the door, sitting on the sofa and snacking while waiting for her to come up. The door creaked open. I couldn't see their figures or expressions, but I could hear everything clearly. Felix, in a cold voice, said, "Miss Tiffany, stop it. It's inappropriate for a man and woman to be so close, especially when I'm married to your sister. Such intimate behavior is improper." "Felix, you know it should have been me marrying you," Tiffany hurriedly said. "We missed our chance 3 years ago, but if I'm willing now, do you still want me?" As she spoke, she tried to lean against Felix, forcing him to take a few steps back. It was honestly unexpected yet somehow logical that Tiffany would extend an olive branch to Felix in this lifetime. Tiffany didn't marry Felix, but Henry also didn't want to marry her. After all, he had his pick of women, and she was just the plainest one among them. Besides, now that she had no use to him, it was obvious he'd discard her like she was nothing. I even doubted if Henry had an affair with Tiffany in the past, just because of the sister-in-law title. So Tiffany was in a panic. Henry didn't want to marry her. She needed to find someone else quickly. It's been 3 years, she's older now. Even though Henry never publicly acknowledged her, everyone in the elite circle knew about their affair. Who would want a used-up woman? What surprised me was that she'd actually go after the crippled guy she once looked down upon. Maybe I was cracking the seeds a bit too loudly. Tiffany suddenly yelled in my direction, "Who? Who's there?" I walked out from behind the door, innocently spreading my hands to show the seeds. "You what? What did you hear?" Tiffany snapped, flustered and furious. "Oh, I was just sitting there listening," I said nonchalantly, seating myself in Felix's office chair, looking every bit the queen. "I heard you want to be Felix's concubine. Is that right? Or mistress?" "Don't insult me, Coco." Tiffany, enraged, tried to hit me, but Felix pushed her back steadily. "Oh, did I get it wrong? You just want to share a husband with a sister, right?" "That's a concubine in ancient times," I said, "but Felix can't decide that. I make the decisions in our house." I continued while lounging in the chair. Felix smiled indulgently at me and didn't argue. "You should ask me. After all, in ancient times, the main wife, oversaw taking concubines, I looked at her challengingly. Tiffany, knowing she had no standing, stormed out of Felix's office, slamming the door in frustration. "Did I say something wrong, honey?" I asked Felix, batting my eyelashes. Felix patted my head tenderly and said, "Whatever my wife says is right." Then he added, "But your husband here won't take any concubines." Meanwhile, Henry was even more desperate than Tiffany. Over the past 2 years, Mr. Howard's health had deteriorated, and most company affairs were managed by Henry. But like in the past, he could barely maintain the status quo and was even showing signs of decline. Under such circumstances, shareholders demanded Felix return and take over, replacing Henry. Although Felix left the Howard family to start his own business, after being recognized, he still had equal inheritance rights as Henry. Legally, he was still qualified to compete for the company. So Henry panicked. Felix and I were woken up by an urgent phone call from Henry. We exchanged worried glances. As expected, Henry's anxious voice came through the receiver. "Dad's not going to make it. He wants to see you one last time. Come home quickly." We hurriedly got dressed and drove to the Howard family estate. Mr. Howard had a few more years in the previous life, but due to a series of butterfly effects, almost everything had been accelerated in this world. His critical condition was anticipated. The Howard family estate was brightly lit and bustling with people, the entire atmosphere tense. Felix held my hand tightly as we walked in. I could feel his palms sweating. Mr. Howard wasn't a good father or husband, but we saw his guilt and efforts to make amends towards Felix over the years. Despite any resentment Felix might have felt, facing his father's end brought complicated feelings. We were stopped at the door and waited for a long time before Henry came out. He let Felix in but blocked me. "This is a family matter. Miss Tiffany, you shouldn't hear Mr. Howard's final words." I pressed my lips together, saying nothing, and anxiously waited outside. As time passed without movement, Felix still didn't come out. I grew worried, fearing something had happened to him but couldn't rush in to check. "Worried about your husband, sis," Henry's now calm voice came from behind me. The urgency from earlier was gone. I glared at him, ignoring his taunt. He wasn't annoyed, just smiled and continued, 3 years ago, you turned me down here. I wonder if you'll regret it after tonight." A chill ran down my spine. Sensing something was off, a familiar figure whispered something to Henry. The man wore a bent baseball cap that obscured his face, but his build and profile seemed familiar. At that moment, a few police officers suddenly barged in, showed their badges, and said, "We're from the police department. We received a tip that Mr. Felix is involved in tax evasion and money laundering. There's substantial evidence. Mr. Felix needs to come with us for investigation." I was stunned, instinctively looking at Henry, who shrugged, but the triumph was clear in his eyes. "Officer, someone's framing him. He's law-abiding. He'd never do such things," I pleaded, but it was in vain. No one listened to my desperate explanation. I was extremely anxious, but could only watch helplessly as the police broke in and took Felix away. Mr. Howard was also shocked by the scene. His breathing became more rapid, and he passed away completely in the middle of the night. This farcical night finally came to an end at dawn. Everyone left the Howard family estate, and the news of Felix being arrested quickly spread throughout City A. Many opportunists quickly turned to Henry, and Felix's company's stock prices plummeted. It was only then that I suddenly remembered who that familiar figure belonged to, Diana, a core member of Felix's team who had been with him since the company was founded. I had seen him at the company a few times, and he always warmly called me sister-in-law. I never doubted him, but he was at Howard family estate last night. I could almost immediately confirm he was Henry's man. The evidence provided by the police was also from him. I staggered back home, feeling lost, and suddenly noticed something unusual at the entrance. Felix and I both have OCD, and the house is always meticulously organized in our fixed order. But today, the placement of the slippers at the entrance had changed. This wasn't like how it was when we left last night. Sensing something amiss, I rushed to Felix's study. All the confidential documents related to his work were gone. There's no way this was just a simple burglary, especially at such a specific time last night. I quickly called the police and also asked the property management to check last night's surveillance footage. The investigation results came out quickly. Tiffany was caught in the interrogation room. I harshly questioned Tiffany on how she dared to use such a low-level theft method. She was bound to be caught in no time. Tiffany's face was full of indifference. I just need to serve a few years in prison. When I get out, he promised he'd marry me. Of course, I knew who she was talking about, Henry. I thought Tiffany had gone mad. She would do anything to help Henry complete his plan for a sliver of hope. But she was right, such a low-level and simple operation could indeed deal us irreparable damage. Henry got hold of Felix's company secrets once again. But just when I was almost in despair, Felix was released, acquitted, and at the same time, news came out that Henry was arrested and imprisoned. He had colluded with Diana and Tiffany to steal others' company secrets and was also suspected of forging evidence to frame others. These charges were enough to keep him behind bars for several years. When I arrived outside the police station, it was already dark. Felix was standing alone under the streetlight, still wearing the coat he had hurriedly put on that night a few days ago. His figure looked especially desolate. My eyes reddened almost immediately, and I ran into his arms. Felix held me tightly. "Don't worry. Do you know who your husband is?" "How could I be so easily taken down?" He gently reassured me. He told me he had long known that Diana was Henry's man. So he purposely kept him close. "If you eliminate one Diana, there will be a second James John. It's better to keep him under my watch, this way I can control his every move." I choked up and blamed him. "Next time, don't keep it from me. I worried about you for so long." He hugged me tighter. I was surprised to find that he was standing firmly, holding me without any of his usual signs of instability. Under my interrogation, he finally confessed. I wanted to keep a low profile before to avoid Henry's traps. "Oh, so no need to keep low now?" I asked, slightly grieved. "No need. Henry is not coming out." In my astonished gaze, Felix pressed my head into his chest. The late autumn wind was chilly, but his embrace was warm. He killed the old man. I was momentarily stunned, then snuggled deeper into his chest. I no longer cared if he had been reborn. Regardless, from now on, he and I were going to embrace a truly exciting life that belonged to us.